He was the weakest adventurer who was stuck on the first floor of the dungeon, but after defeating 10,000 slimes, he finds an ultra-rare card, which summons the strongest servant. The story begins with a boy named Kaido, as he faces off against a slime. It lunges at him, but he uses his bug killer spray to get rid of it, and he seems proud of his achievement. We learn that he's been in the dungeon for 2 years, but he still has the lowest status as an explorer because he can only kill the slimes on the first floor. He's managed to hunt 9,999 of them, and he wants to finish his day by reaching 10,000. So he heads deeper into the dungeon, where he comes across a golden slime, and he sneaks up on it, using his spray to attack. But it dodges, so he pulls out his spray gun, which he uses to finish it off. But he's surprised that he didn't level up even though he killed a rare slime, so he decides to take its magic core, hoping it will be worth a lot. As he approaches the slime, he realizes it dropped a servant card. But he calms himself down and checks its stats, which confirms his suspicions. He looks around to see if he's alone, because he doesn't want anyone to take the card from him. He searches about what kind of card it is, and realizes there's no information available in the database. But he sees that it's a Valkyrie card, and he knows they're considered as demigods in mythology, so he wonders if it's a rare card. He comes across a group of explorers, and he tries to greet them, but they ignore him, and he wishes he had better equipment to be like them. So he thinks about selling the card for a high price, thinking he will be able to buy everything he wants. The receptionist Hitsugaya pays him 1,500 yen for the 3 slime cores, and before he leaves, he asks her how much an angel-type servant card would be worth. So she reveals that it sells for over 1 billion yen, and he can't believe how valuable it is. He runs into his friends Shinji and Hayako, who mention that they also have explorer passes, which allow them to enter attraction areas for free. They ask him if he's still at level 3, and he tells them he only kills slimes, so he isn't going to level up anytime soon. He wonders why they aren't returning to the dungeon, so they remind him about the first time they went to the second floor, where they encountered their first goblin. They thought they could easily defeat it, but they ended up getting wrecked, and they had to use potions to heal themselves, but they decided to give up after the incident. They're surprised that he's been hunting slimes for 2 years, and still hasn't gotten bored of it, so they wonder what drives him to do it, but he says he has his reasons. He returns home, where his parents are worried his studies might be affected due to his work, but he assures them he's fine. As he takes a bath, he thinks about using the card, thinking it will give him the power to explore the deeper levels of the dungeon, but he knows he will be able to buy everything he wants if he just sells it. The next day, he runs into a classmate named Kasura, and they walk to school together. She mentions she saw him getting home late, and wonders where he went, but he lies, saying he was exploring the city with his friends. They come across Shinji and Hayako, but he quickly pulls them aside and asks them to cover for him, because he doesn't want her to know he goes to the dungeon. She asks them what they did the previous day, but when all 3 of them give a different answer, she starts thinking Kaido went to the dungeon, but he assures her this isn't the case. In their class, Kaido asks his friends what they would do if they found a rare servant card, but they tell him servants can only be summoned in the dungeon, thinking it isn't useful, so the best option is to sell it, since they're worth a fortune. He considers their advice, but they tell him not to worry, thinking he doesn't even have a servant card, because they're extremely rare. He knows they're right, because once he summons the servant, he won't be able to sell the card, but he wants to get stronger. So he heads to the dungeon, where he uses the card, and an enormous angel appears before him. It prepares to grab him, but she suddenly disappears, and turns into a girl, who introduces herself as Sylphie. He thinks she looks weak, so he immediately regrets his decision, thinking he has lost the opportunity to become a billionaire. She wonders if something's wrong with him, but he tells her he's okay, and takes her with him to hunt monsters. She immediately senses a slime, and she leads him to it. He's about to kill it with his spray, but he asks her to take care of it, since he wants to see her power. So she attacks it with her divine lightning spell, which leaves him speechless, and he realizes that she has 170 battle points, which means she's 17 times stronger than him. She tells him she's hungry, and he realizes that she wants to eat the slime's core, so he feeds it to her. She senses more slimes, and is about to go and defeat them, but he stops her, thinking he won't make any money, because she eats their cores after she kills them. But he comes up with an idea, and asks her to show him where they are, so that he can kill them with his spray. He finally levels up, and he learns a skill called Slime Slayer, which increases all of his stats by 50% when he's fighting slimes, but he thinks it isn't useful. Sylphie tries to cheer him up, telling him he's doing great because he finally learned a skill, and this makes him tear up. He's about to go home, but he promises to summon her again soon, and he orders her to return to the card. He visits Hitsugaya, who's surprised to see the amount of cores he has, telling him it's a record for the most slimes hunted in a day, and she reveals that they're worth 15,000 yen. At night, Kaido thinks about how powerful Sylphie is, and he thinks that with her help, he can go to the second level, but he's worried about facing a goblin. As he falls asleep, he dreams about a hero named Captain Katsuragi, who went deep into the dungeons to reveal its mystery, and everyone praised him for his courage and wisdom. The next day, Kaido heads to the second floor with Sylphie, hoping to find out what the dungeons really are and become a hero like Captain Katsuragi. But he suddenly starts trembling, so Sylphie wonders if something's wrong with him, but he assures her he's okay. She holds his hand, and this helps him calm down, so he thanks her. He recalls the time he went to the second floor 2 years ago, but she suddenly senses a goblin nearby. So he starts running away, but he remembers Captain Katsuragi, knowing he can't become a hero if he lacks courage. He starts slapping himself, which confuses Sylphie, but he tells her he's just pumping himself up. They sneak up on the goblin, and Kaido asks Sylphie to defeat it, since he doesn't have the courage to face it. So she prepares to use her divine lightning, but Kaido changes his mind, wanting to defeat it himself. But his legs start trembling, and he tells her to help him if it looks like he's in trouble. He takes a swing at the goblin, but he misses, and it charges at him, so he uses his shield to defend himself, pushing it back. He takes another swing, but it manages to disarm him, and it lunges at him, but he uses his spray to blind it. He retrieves his sword, and he prepares to deliver the finishing blow, but he trips on a stone, but he ends up stabbing the goblin by accident, allowing him to win the fight. He's about to cry, and Sylphie tells him he's amazing, but she thinks she should help the next time. He levels up, and is surprised that killing 1,000 slimes didn't do anything, but just defeating one goblin got him to level up. He learns a new skill called the Goblin Slayer, which is given to those who overcome their fear of goblins and defeat one on their own. It increases his stats by 10% when fighting a goblin, but it's only a temporary skill because he got lucky during the fight. They start hunting more goblins, and Kaido's stats continue to increase. He wonders if Sylphie knows anything about the dungeon, but she explains that she doesn't, saying the only thing she knows is that she must be useful to her master. Kaido returns to Hitsugaya, who's surprised to see the goblin cores, and she's impressed that he was able to collect 4 cores on his first try. The next day, Kaido's mother wakes him up, but he's so tired that he can't move, and she tells him not to work so hard. He meets with Kasura, who thinks he went to a dungeon since his body is sore. But he denies it, telling her he started training like a bodybuilder because he wants to gain muscle, but she tells him that looking like that doesn't suit him. At school, he tells his friends that he has started hunting goblins, and they're surprised that he was able to defeat one. He's annoyed they doubted him, but he mentions that he now has more confidence in his abilities, so he will go even deeper into the dungeon. Kaido keeps hunting goblins, and manages to reach level 10, but is surprised by how much it has increased his stats. He acquires a new skill called God's Blessing, which is given to those loved by the gods, and it increases the boost in his stats whenever he levels up, depending on how much the gods love him. He's happy that he has finally acquired an overpowered skill, and he suddenly starts bowing to Sylphie because he believes the skill is linked to her. He grabs her hand, telling her he's glad he met her, and she's happy to have a master who cares for her. They come across a glowing skeleton, and Kaido thinks it's affected by his God's Blessing. Sylphie creates a barrier, and the skeleton tries to attack, but the barrier prevents it from reaching them. He uses his new weapon to hit the skeleton, but it doesn't seem to do any damage, and he's surprised by how durable it is. He tells Sylphie to use her divine lightning, so she uses it, and she's able to defeat the skeleton. But it only drops a core, so he's disappointed, since he thought it would drop a rare item. She tells him she's hungry, and he realizes the core is red, thinking it might be rare, but he decides to feed it to her anyway. After that, Kaido asks Hitsugaya about the value of the core, but he's shocked when she mentions it's worth over 2 million yen. She notices he's upset, realizing he lost a red core, but she tells him not to give up, because he might come across another glowing skeleton. At night, Kaido can't stop thinking about the money he lost, but he thinks Sylphie deserves a reward since she's been helping him. He knows that he was just a nobody before he met her, but he was able to get stronger thanks to her. He thinks he's ready to enter the 3rd floor, but he's worried that the monsters might attack him in groups. The next day, he tells Sylphie he will be fighting alone for a while, which makes her wonder if she did something wrong, asking him if he doesn't need her anymore. But he calms her down and explains that he's planning on entering the 3rd floor, but he doesn't want to become completely dependent on her, so he wants to get stronger. He tells her he trusts her and sees her as his little sister instead of a servant, so she thinks she's lucky to have him as her master. A goblin suddenly appears, and he asks her to let him take care of it, but he ends up getting injured. Kaido buys a potion from Hitsugaya, but it's incredibly expensive, so he goes broke. But he knows that in order to reach the 3rd floor, he needs to get new equipment and stock up on magic cores for Sylphie to eat. The next day, he goes to the 1st floor to hunt slimes, and as he tells his friends about his plan, Kasura overhears him, but he manages to convince her that they're talking about something else. He manages to collect a bunch of cores, and prepares to enter the 3rd floor, but Sylphie suddenly senses a silver slime. He attacks it with his spray gun, and it tries to run away, but Sylphie kills it with her divine lightning. It drops a devil-class servant card, and he wonders if he should use it, but he always wanted to have both a god and a devil beside him. So he decides to use it, and a girl named Lyciria appears before him. Kaido is disappointed, since she's nothing like the picture on her card, and she thinks he's too dumb to be her master. Sylphie is scared of her, so she hides behind him and tells her to respect their master, but Lyciria explains that she means them no harm, saying she's just behaving like a devil. She mentions that she's hungry, but he tells her she hasn't done anything yet, and Sylphie senses a slime nearby, so Lyciria tells him to feed her after she gets rid of it. She summons her spear and uses it to shoot a fireball, which causes a massive explosion, but he thinks this type of power is expected from her, since she has 130 battle points. He gives her the magic core it dropped, and she eats it, but she asks for more. He refuses her request, so she calls him cheap, but he tells her to use her corrosive breath, and she's annoyed that he wants her to do more, but he promises to give her another core. They come across a goblin, and she uses her corrosive breath, which instantly melts the goblin, but everyone's scared by how terrifying her attack was. She eats the core, and finds it more delicious than the one dropped by the slime, so she wants to go deeper into the dungeon. But Kaido stops her, saying he needs to get new equipment before they enter the 3rd floor, and he thinks she must be tired. But she still wants to go further into the dungeon, so Sylphie tells her he's only saying it because he cares for her, and she decides to wait until tomorrow. The next day, they head to the 3rd floor, and Kaido reveals that he bought an expensive crossbow, but Lyciria tells him that the quality of a weapon doesn't depend on its price. They see 2 hellhounds, and he shoots them with his crossbow, but he misses, and they start charging at him. So Sylphie creates a barrier, as Lyciria blows them away. He gives her one of the cores as a reward, but she wants both, since she defeated the 2 hellhounds. But he refuses, promising to give her more after they defeat other enemies, and she threatens to send him to hell if he's lying. 2 wild boars attack them, and Lyciria tries to blow them up, but one of them manages to get past. Kaido decides to take care of it, so he shoots an arrow, which hits its eye, but it still keeps rushing towards him. He falls down as he panics, and Sylphie tries to help him, but he shoots another arrow, which ends up hitting the boar's head, and manages to kill it. Sylphie praises him, and Lyciria tells him he fell because he panicked, but he tells her he just tripped. After that, Kaido realizes he wasn't able to make money, because Lyciria kept asking for his course. He hears a group of girls talking about reaching the 6th floor after forming a party, and he wonders if he will also be able to reach it with Sylphie and Lyciria. At school, Kaido's friends wonder why he's so happy, because they're worried about finding a university, but he hasn't given it a single thought. Kasura hears them, and wonders which university he's aiming to get into, so he tells her he still wants to be in the same school as her. In the dungeon, we see Kaido hunting monsters, and when Lyciria eats all the cores, he asks Sylphie if something's bothering her, but she tells him she's okay. At home, Kaido watches a movie, which makes him think Sylphie and Lyciria are going to fight each other, so he needs to do something to stop them. The next day, Kasura realizes Kaido didn't sleep last night, so she wonders what's been bothering him. He can't tell her about his real problem, so he mentions that his friends know two girls with opposite personalities, and it seems the nice one doesn't like the other girl. He asks for her advice on how to get them to like each other, and she tells him to ask the nice girl how she feels. In the dungeon, Kaido summons Sylphie and asks her if she hates Luceria, so she explains that she was scared of her at first, but she has come to like her. He thinks something must be bothering her, since she has been acting strange lately, and he wants her to be open with him, because she's important to him. So she tells him one thing is irritating her, which is the fact that he has been kind to Luceria, and she wants him to treat her the same way. She explains that he has been giving Luceria more cores to eat, and ever since Luceria showed up, he hasn't been talking to her, so he assures her he will work on these things. As they continue their journey, Kaido praises Sylphie, but this makes Luceria jealous, and she asks him to praise her as well. They come across a wild boar, and Sylphie levels up after she defeats it, so she becomes happy, and she gives the credit to Kaido. 3 hellhounds are about to attack them, and he asks her to take care of them, because he wants to see how much stronger she has become. So she uses her divine lightning, and he's impressed that she was able to defeat all of them in an instant. A wild boar rushes towards them, so she protects everyone with a barrier, and he realizes it lasts longer than before. Luceria is about to finish it off, but Kaido wants to do it himself, so he shoots an arrow at the boar. He gives 2 magic cores to Sylphie, and nothing to Luceria, since she didn't do anything in the fight, but Sylphie asks him to give her more, because she's still hungry. He realizes that her appetite increased with her level, and as he goes to Hitsugaya, she notes that he has been bringing back fewer cores. He returns to the first floor to hunt slimes, and Luceria wants to help, but he stops her, because if they help him, he won't have any cores to sell. Luceria tells him he shouldn't have summoned them if he isn't going to let them do anything, but Sylphie mentions they're there to support him. He tells them their support encourages him, so Luceria decides to cheer for him. Hitsugaya is surprised that Kaido is bringing slime cores again, because she thought he would have gone to the 4th floor. But he knows his equipment is too weak for the 4th floor, so he searches online for armor and weapons, but when he finds a suit he likes, he's shocked to see how expensive it is. The next day, they find a special slime, and Kaido tells them they have to defeat it no matter what, so Sylphie and Luceria obliterate it with their spells. He thinks he will get another servant card, but is surprised to find a magic orb. He gets excited, because it will allow him to fulfill his dream of becoming a wizard, so he decides to use it. He breaks the ball, and acquires a new water spell, so he wants to test it on a hellhound. He tells Sylphie to create a barrier around them, and asks Luceria to interfere if he fails to defeat the hellhound. He shoots a water ball, and he manages to land a direct hit, but it doesn't do anything. The hellhound lunges at them, and Luceria defeats it, but he's disappointed by how weak his new spell is, thinking he should have sold the magic ball. At night, Kaido runs into Kasura, and he thanks her for her advice, because he was able to solve the problem between the 2 girls. So she realizes that he was asking her for selfish reasons, but he assures her it was for his friends. She decides to call it a day, but Kaido thinks something's off about her, wondering if she's jealous he has another girl in his life, but he thinks it's impossible. Kaido returns to the dungeon, where he works on improving his water ball, and he learns how to transform its shape, but he ends up getting exhausted, and he collapses. As he leaves the dungeon, he bumps into a girl named Ari, who realizes he's exhausted, telling him to be more careful. He apologizes for bumping into her, and he walks away, as she realizes that he's been training hard. Her companion Miku thinks he's a weirdo, but her friend Hikari thinks they should work as hard as him, so they decide to hunt as many monsters as they can. We see Kaido in his classroom, as his teacher scolds him for sleeping during her lecture, and he tells her he's going to train hard, so everyone laughs at him. His friends ask him why he's training, so he tells them he's trying to improve his water ball, thinking it's going to be useful during his raids. But Kasura hears him, asking him if he's been training in the dungeon, so he denies it, telling her he's trying to learn how to dance, and she advises him to take care of himself. Kaido uses his water ball on a goblin, shoving it into its mouth, and the goblin ends up drowning. But he realizes that he's stuck at level 11 because he isn't getting enough experience from the monsters on the 3rd floor, so he thinks about heading deeper into the dungeon. The next day, we see him wearing the expensive suit he saw online, but Luceria tells him he looks like a loser. He explains that it protects his body, but the material is thin, so he still feels pain when he gets hit. He adds that he bought a bracelet, which increases the effectiveness of his spells, thinking it will make his water ball stronger, but he reveals that he hasn't tested it yet. They reach the 4th floor, but Sylphie senses a dangerous monster and a giant cockroach appears. So the girls panic and they start blasting it with their spells, as Kaido explains that the 4th floor is filled with roaches, but he realizes that they left him behind. We see them on the 5th floor and Kaido catches up to them as Sylphie tells him they were scared. She apologizes for rushing ahead, but he tells her he isn't angry, telling her they were able to clear the 4th floor in an instant. He reveals that he collected the cores of the roaches, and he feeds them, but they don't like it, thinking it tastes terrible. They decide to explore the 5th floor, and he sees monsters made of sand and mud, so he shoots them, but he realizes that his attacks are working because they're immune to physical damage. So he asks for Luceria's help, and she uses her hellfire to burn them away, as he realizes that he needs to rely on the girls to defeat the monsters on that floor. They head deeper into the dungeon, but Sylphie mentions that she senses something behind a wall, so she destroys it, and they realize that there's a secret passage. They decide to check it out, as Kaido tells the girls to be careful, thinking the place is dangerous. But Luceria activates a trap, and an arrow hits him, so he squirms in pain. After he recovers, they continue their journey, and they see a massive door at the end of the passage, as Sylphie mentions that she senses a powerful presence inside. He can't open it, thinking they need an item to enter, but Sylphie uses her divine lightning, blowing a hole into the door, and they enter the room, where they encounter 2 boss monsters. They decide to defeat the ogre first, so the girls blast it with their spells, but they realize it's immune to magic, and it lunges at them, so Sylphie protects everyone with her barrier. He orders Luceria to deal with the slime, and he starts shooting the ogre, realizing it's vulnerable to physical attacks. But he runs out of arrows, and he realizes that Luceria is struggling because the slime is also immune to magic. So he uses his water ball, but it suddenly turns into ice, as he realizes that his bracelet enhanced his magic. He launches it at the ogre, and they realize it's working, but he only has 3 shots left because he's running out of mana. So he transforms the water balls into spikes, and he aims for the ogre's head, allowing him to defeat it. The slime is about to hit Luceria, but he protects her, trying to stop it, but his shield starts melting. Sylphie uses her divine spear, blowing a hole into the slime, but they realize it's still alive, so he considers retreating, but he remembers Captain Katsuragi, thinking he can't become a hero if he runs away. So he charges in, and he starts attacking it with his spray, as Sylphie protects him with her barrier. He pulls out his spray guns, and he keeps spraying until its health reaches 0. The slime disappears, so the girls celebrate, but they realize he's injured, so he drinks a potion to heal himself. Luceria levels up, and he realizes that he has reached level 15, so he thinks he can keep up with the other explorers. He checks the monster's drops, and he sees a red core, along with a magic sword, which he realizes is a rare item, but he wonders why it looks like a kitchen knife. He tries selling the red core, but Hitsugaya wonders where he found it, so he tells her about the hidden dungeon, and she decides to send someone to investigate it. She reveals that he found a special magic core, and its value is unknown, but she agrees to buy it for a high price. She invites him to join an upcoming event, saying the explorers will form parties to investigate the 7th floor, and he agrees to participate. Kaido returns to his classroom, where he brags to his friends, telling them he's about to clear the 6th floor so that he can join the event, saying he's excited to form a party with other explorers. Kasura asks them if they're talking about a dance party, so they convince her that he's planning to attend one, so she tells him she wants to join. Kaito attends the event, realizing countless adventurers have decided to participate, and he meets Ari's group, wondering if they are going to be his party. In a flashback, we see that Kasura is Captain Katsuragi's daughter as she sees him off. He promises to be back early, saying they'll have dinner together, and she looks forward to his return. Back in the present, Kasura wakes up in her room, and she leaves for school, wondering if Kaido is training again. The explorers line up for the event, and we see Kaido with Ari's group as the transfer gate activates, sending them to the 6th floor. He's glad everyone made it, revealing that he was nervous because he doesn't use transfer gates often, and the girls tell him they aren't so different, saying they were worried that something might go wrong. A man points them to the 7th floor, saying the event is scheduled for 3 hours, and they see a convenience store, so they decide to buy everything they need. Mika realizes that Kaido's bag is loaded, and he wonders how the girls are able to carry their items, so they show him their magic bags, but he can't believe they all have it, knowing it's incredibly expensive. So they reveal that their parents bought it for them, and he realizes they're from wealthy families. Ari mentions that he appears to be well equipped, and he explains that he worked hard to buy everything he needs, but Mika tells him his suit looks weird, but Ari tells her she's being rude. They reach the 7th floor, as Mika reveals that it's filled with golems, and they encounter a group of custodians. The leader of the group greets them, knowing they're going to participate in the event, so he wishes them the best of luck. Hikari knows that the custodians keep the dungeon clean, and she's glad they're doing their jobs. Kaido asks everyone about their levels, saying he's at level 16, so Ari reveals that she's 2 levels higher than him, and her friends are still at level 15, but Miku explains that Hikari has an incredible amount of mana. A stone golem suddenly appears, so Ari rushes in, and she's able to overpower it, slicing it in half. Kaido is impressed, but they see a bronze golem approaching, so Hikari uses a spell called Earth Wave to immobilize it, as Mika summons her servant Snatch, which starts scratching the golem. Hikari launches a fire bolt, which burns the golem, as Ari delivers the finishing blow, reducing its health to 0. Kaido tells the girls they're amazing, but an iron golem appears behind them, and it prepares to smash Hikari. But Ari protects her, and she strikes it with all her might, but she realizes that its armor is too tough. Hikari uses her fire bolt, but the golem withstands it, and Miku orders Snatch to fight, but his attacks are working, and he ends up getting hit. Kaido thinks about summoning Sylphie and Lyciria, but he drops his magic sword, and we learn that he looked into it, so he knows that it inflicts the damage he imagines when he lands an attack. He thinks he can use it to defeat the golem, so he tells Hikari to use her Earth Wave, and she casts the spell, as he runs to the golem, stabbing it from behind. He imagines that the sword has the power to shatter it, and it suddenly disappears, as he realizes that he was able to defeat it. After the event, we see Kaido with the girls, who are impressed that he was able to defeat the golem with his magic sword. He tells them about its abilities, saying he acquired it by defeating a monster, and he thinks Snatch is awesome, telling Mika he has never seen anything like him in the movies. So she reveals that servants don't show up on camera, and he thinks this explains why the guild doesn't know about Sylphie and Lyciria. He asks her if she's keeping Snatch a secret, but she explains that she got him at an auction and registered him with the guild, so everyone knows about him. Ari asks Kaido if he wants to join their party again, because they're planning to reach the next transfer gate, which is located at the 11th floor. He thinks he isn't good enough to join them, because there's nothing special about him, but they tell him it doesn't matter, because they like having him around, and they ask him if he doesn't have a party. So he tells them he isn't working with other explorers, but he has a god and a devil by his side, and they have no idea what he's talking about. He thinks about keeping his servants a secret, because he's afraid everyone will think he's a creep since they look so young. He explains that he needs time to think about it, because he needs to talk to someone about joining them, and they realize his situation is complicated, so Ari tells him to take his time. After that, he wears his contact lens, which allows him to see the stats of everything around him, and he returns to the dungeon, where he summons Sylphie and Lyciria, but they appear to be upset, because he didn't summon them at the usual time, so he explains that he had a busy schedule. He tells them about Ari's group, but they think he doesn't need to join her, because he already has them. We see Kaido with Kasura, who asks him if he's free on Saturday, because she wants to go shopping with him, and he agrees to spend time with her. She meets her friend, and she starts walking with her, as Shinji and Hayako congratulate him for scoring a date with her. But he explains that they're just going to go shopping together, and his friends ask him about the event, so he tells them he joined a party with 3 girls, who are about the same age as him. So they think being an explorer is awesome, and they consider returning to the dungeon. We see Kasura and Kaido in a mall, where they see an ad about magic cores, and Kasura realizes that Kaido is listening to it. So she thinks he's interested in dungeons, but she tells him not to think about it for the day. She asks him about the last time they went out together, and he recalls that they had a great time with her father when they were little. She tries on the clothes she wants to buy, asking him for his opinion, but he just keeps telling her she looks great. She asks him which one he liked best, and he picks the one she's currently wearing, so she decides to buy it. They go outside, and she tells him she wants to ride a boat, so he joins her, but he realizes they're surrounded by people on dates, so he feels like they're actually dating, but he thinks she would never ask him to go on a date with her. She realizes that his body appears to be improving, thinking it's because of his training, and she mentions that she's having a great time. Later that day, they see the same ad in a train station, and Kaido watches it, as Kasura sees a mother with her baby, so she tells him she wants to go somewhere before she returns home. They head to the guild, and she knows the dungeon is nearby, thinking her father is still inside. She recalls the day her father promised to have dinner with her, but she reveals that he never returned, and she wonders why people go to the dungeon. She tells Kaido she had fun with him, but she thinks it's time to call it a day, and she walks away, as he mentions that he wants to become a hero like her father. But she hears him, so he pretends that he didn't say anything. We see Kaido back in the dungeon, as he tries combining his water ball with his sword, creating a frozen blade, and he defeats a golem. Sylphie thinks it's cool, but Luceria knows he's trying to impress the girls, and he's surprised she can tell. Sylphie wonders if he really plans on joining the other party, wondering if he's not happy with them. Luceria also gets mad that he has been feeding them less, so he agrees not to join the party. But Sylphie changes her mind and decides to support him, asking why he wants to join another party, so he mentions that they are too strong, so he wants to join the other party to level up his own skills. Sylphie appreciates his effort, and he mentions he will only join the other party on weekends. Back at home, Kaido gets nervous as he thinks about calling Ari, but he suddenly gets a call from Kasura. He wonders what she wants, but he asks her if she knows any way to make a person less nervous, saying Shinji was nervous about calling a girl, so he wanted to help him out. So she tells him about a time when she was younger and was nervous about a performance, but her father poked her and made her smile, which helped her to be less nervous. Kaido gives it a go, and mentions that it seemed to help him, so Kasura realizes the advice was for him to talk to another girl, and she says goodnight, as we see she wanted to ask him out, but she got jealous. We see Ari training, and Kaido manages to call her, telling her he can join them, but only on weekends. But she mentions it's fine, since they all go to school during the week, and they only go to the dungeon on the weekend anyway. We see the group in the dungeon, and Kaido instructs Hikari to use her Earth Wave, and Miku to summon Snatch to distract the golems. He uses his Ice Sword, taking out 2 of the golems, and the girls finish the rest off. They're impressed by his new skill, and Ari notes his instructions were also precise, so it doesn't seem like he normally explores alone. His stomach suddenly growls, so they decide to stop for lunch, but he can't believe how fancy their lunch is, so he realizes they're on a different level. The next day, they decide to go to the 8th floor, and we see Kaido wearing a life jacket. Ari wonders if he can't swim, but he mentions that on the 8th floor, there are water-based monsters in areas that are submerged, so he's just being prepared, noting that the jacket also has magic resistance. The group follows Snatch, and it detects an enemy ahead. An axolotl appears, spitting acid at Kaido, and it destroys his jacket. He can't believe it's gone, and he dodges its next attack, but Mika takes it out with her crossbow. The group comes across other monsters, and Kaido gets caught by a squid. He gets thrown into the water, and he panics, but Ari tells him he can just stand, and the girls realize he really can't swim. The group comes across a swarm of fish, and as they take them out, Kaido's gun runs out of ammo, so he copies Ari's weapon with his skill and starts cutting up the fish. They manage to kill them all, but Kaido runs out of mana and he passes out. When he wakes up, he sees he's on Ari's lap, so he quickly gets up. He realizes his mana has recovered, so Ari mentions she used a magic potion on him. He apologizes because it must have been expensive, but she doesn't mind since they're a party, so they should help each other, and Mika mentions they were able to get a lot of cores from the fish anyway. Snatch suddenly senses something approaching, and a massive dinosaur boss appears. Kaido tells them to retreat, so the group runs, but the monster chases after them, and there are rocks that block their exit, so Kaido tells them they will need to fight. He tells them how they should attack, but when they follow his instructions, their attacks have no effect. Kaido manages to stab it with his sword, but he knows it's not enough damage. While he distracts it, Ari runs on its back, and she stabs it in the head, but it's not enough, and she gets thrown away. Kaido rushes to her, but she says she's fine, since she will become a hero. He realizes it's looking bad, so he thinks about summoning Sylphie and Lyciria. The monster prepares to attack the other two girls, so he activates his cards, and Sylphie and Lyciria appear. He apologizes for summoning them on short notice, but he tells them to defeat the boss, so they both use their spells, and they're able to wipe it out. Kaido thanks them for their help, and Lyciria is jealous he's with the other girls, but Mika suddenly hugs Sylphie, finding her cute, and Hikari takes a liking to Lyciria. Kaido apologizes for keeping them a secret, and Mika suggests having a bath together to celebrate their bond. So they go to the bathhouse, and Ari is amazed Kaido has both an angel and a demon as his servants. The girls get comfortable together, and we see Kaido by himself with Snatch. After that, Hikari and Mika head home, and Kaido is left with Ari. He wonders about her wanting to be a hero, so she mentions she wanted to become a hero since she was a child. We see her asking her father why they need to be strong, so he mentions it's so they can protect the people that they love, and those who can do that are heroes. So it's what she always wanted, and also why she became a dungeon explorer. She mentions her university has an open weekend, so she invites him to check it out. He tells his friends about it, but they suggest he should go with Kasura. He thinks it's impossible, but Kasura and her friend overhear them, so he forces himself to ask her to go with him to the Oka University. She's happy that he's thinking about going to the same university, so she agrees to go with him, and the others say they're busy, so they can have time alone. The weekend arrives, and Kaido is surprised to see Kasura wearing the new outfit that he picked. They take a train to the Oka University, and Kasura tells Kaido to sit closer, and she thanks him for inviting her to the event. He knows that she always wanted to visit the campus, but she's glad that she's able to go with him, and he notes that they appear to be on a date, but he thinks she doesn't have feelings for him. She tells him she's excited to see the university, but his friends interrupt them as he wonders what they're doing there, because he knows they're interested in going to other schools. So they explain that they want to see the event, and they promise not to get in his way. He sees an ad about explorers, and she asks him if he's disappointed that he isn't in the dungeon, but he explains that he's happy to spend time with her, promising to forget about the dungeon for the day. They arrive at the academy, and Kaido's friends think it looks amazing. As they look around the campus, Kasura tells Kaido about the cherry trees, saying they will be walking under the cherry blossoms once they enroll there. So he imagines having a beautiful moment with her, as she realizes he's acting strange, and he notes that it's too early to be daydreaming, because he still needs to work on improving his grades. They reach the reception area, where they meet Ari, and she asks about Kaido's friends, so they quickly introduce themselves. She wonders if Kasura is Kaido's girlfriend, so he explains that they're just friends, and Ari tells them to feel free to look around, promising to give them a tour later. So they walk away, as she mentions that Kasura is just his friend, but she wonders why she feels relieved. Kaido's friends ask him about Ari, so he explains that they met in the dungeon, saying she's the one who told him about the event. But Kasura appears to be upset, realizing Ari is the reason why he decided to visit the campus, and she reminds him about his promise to forget about dungeons. But his friends drag him away, telling her they're going to get flowers, and they ask him if he formed a party with Ari, and they're jealous he got to meet her. But they know that Kasura is worried about him, because he keeps going into the dungeon, so they tell him to be careful what he says around her. They visit the auditorium, realizing it's enormous, and they see the digital chalkboard, as Kasura mentions that the students can attend class using their tablets. Kaido sees a defibrillator, and he's about to mention that it looks like the ones in the dungeon, but his friends stop him, calling him an idiot. They check out the other facilities, as they realize that everything looks perfect, but Kaido's friends think they won't be able to enroll there, because their grades aren't good enough. He knows that he's also an underachiever, so he thinks about studying hard, because he wants to be in the same school as Kasura. But his friends ask him how he's going to pay the tuition fee, knowing it's extremely expensive, and he's about to mention that he's going to explore the dungeon, but he realizes that Kasura is listening, so he explains that he's going to get a part-time job. He starts dreaming about having another beautiful moment with her, but he's interrupted by Hikari and Miku, and he introduces them to his friends. Kasura wonders how he met the girls, so he thinks about coming up with an excuse, knowing he can't tell her the truth, but they tell her they met him in a dungeon. So she becomes upset, and they ask him why he looks pale, but Ari arrives, inviting everyone to have lunch at the cafeteria. They're about to eat together, and Kaido's friends think the food looks amazing, but Ari tells them it's cheap, and they can even refill their drinks for free. They start eating, realizing it tastes delicious, and everyone thinks the Oka Academy is the best. After the meal, Kasura leaves with Kaido to get drinks for everyone, and Hayako asks the girls if they know an explorer named Onagawa. So they explain that they don't like him, thinking he's too strict as an instructor, and Hayako starts imitating him, as the girls find him amusing. They realize that the boys are also explorers, and Hayako explains that they're licensed, but they've stopped exploring the dungeon. He explains that they used to sleep during lectures, so they missed out on the important lessons, and he mentions that he used a potion during one of his classes. But it didn't work, because items lose their effectiveness if their user is more than 3 kilometers away from the dungeon. Ari explains that the dungeon park was built in a 3-kilometer radius around the entrance, so that the explorers can research items within the area. She mentions that they need to follow several rules while inside the park, and the boys think it's an excellent place to hang out. But Kaido suddenly returns with Kasura, and they give everyone drinks, but she wonders why they enjoy going to the dungeon. After that, they visit the swimming pool, as Kaido recalls that Kasura saved him when he almost drowned, and protected him from a stray dog. Hikari mentions that she feels strange, saying she has never felt like this before, and Mika thinks it has something to do with Kaido. They make their way to the soccer field, but Hikari can't stop staring at Kaido, and she loses her footing, but Kaido catches her, asking her if she's okay. She thanks him for saving her, as the others mention that his moves are impressive, but Mika asks him how long he's going to hold her. So he puts her down, as Mika asks her if she's okay, but she doesn't respond. There's a ball that suddenly flies at Miku, but Kaido kicks it away, and it lands in the goal, so everyone thinks he's amazing. Ari invites everyone to the dojo, but she wonders why she did it, and she demonstrates her skills. Everyone applauds her, but she realizes she's in love with Kaido. Before they part ways, they exchange numbers, and Ari tells them to contact her if they have questions about the academy. She's glad they were able to spend time together, and Kaido looks forward to seeing the girls again, and they bid each other farewell. We see Kaido and his friends riding the train, and Hayako asks Shinji which girl he likes, but he explains that he can't choose, because he likes all 3 of them. Hayako thinks they should explore the dungeon again, so that they can meet girls, and he asks for Kasura's opinion, but she just tells them to do whatever they want. That evening, we see Kaido with Kasura, and he tells her he's going to study hard, so that they can go to the Oka Academy together. But she asks him if he likes anyone from Ari's group, so he explains that they're not his type, and he reveals that he likes someone, but he doesn't want to tell her who it is. She asks him why he keeps calling everyone using their first name, but he only calls her by her last name, so he wonders if something's wrong, but she heads to her house, telling him it's nothing. We see Kaido taking a bath, as he wonders why Kasura appears to be upset, and he realizes she's jealous, but he thinks it's impossible, thinking she doesn't like him. He remembers Sylphie and Lyciria, realizing he didn't summon them, so he thinks they will be angry, and he wonders what he should tell them when he sees them again. The next day, Kaido offers them his magic course, but Lyciria reminds him that he abandoned them, so he explains that he had to attend a school event, and he offers to give them 3 cores each. But they think it's not enough, and they tell him they want 200 cores, but a rare slime appears behind them, so he tells them to attack it. Lyciria blasts it with her spell, and he decides to give them 10 cores each, so they forgive him, telling him not to abandon them next time. He sees an item dropped by the slime, so he checks its stats, and he realizes that it allows him to use an invisible power. He decides to give it a try, but nothing happens, thinking it's because the power is invisible, so he strikes the water, and he sees the impact, but he thinks it's too weak to use against monsters. So he decides to combine it with his magic sword, and he's able to part the water, and he realizes that he can use it to control his ice spell. Ari's group appears, and he tells her he wants to go to the university, but he thinks his grades aren't good enough. So she offers to tutor him, but he asks her if Kasura can join them, and she allows it, as her friends tell him they'll be joining as well. But his servants appear to be jealous, so he gives them more cores to cheer them up, and the girls think they're cute. They reach the 9th floor, as Sylphie mentions that she senses a powerful monster ahead, so Kaido wonders what they should do, because there's no way around it. They decide to take it on, and Ari mentions that they should retreat if they can't defeat it. They see an enormous monster, and Lyciria recognizes it as an Orthros, but they wonder what it's doing there, because it isn't supposed to appear on the 9th floor. Kaido suggests retreating, but it suddenly charges in, so Sylphie protects everyone with her barrier, as Ari and Miku prepare their magic guns. Hikari uses her Earth Wave to immobilize the Orthros, as Luceria burns it with her spell, but it doesn't work, and it starts breathing fire. Luceria uses her Corrosive Breath, and Miku orders Snatch to attack, but Kaido realizes that they aren't doing enough damage. So he decides to distract it, as he orders Luceria to burn its stomach, so she runs to it and blasts it with her Hellfire. He orders Sylphie to use her Divine Spear, so she charges in, as Luceria burns it again. But it fights on, and it's about to breathe fire again, so Kaido stops it using his Water Ball, as everyone attacks it with everything they have, and they manage to defeat it. So they celebrate, and Miku suggests taking a break, because they're already exhausted. But Sylphie suddenly senses another powerful presence, and a voice tells them they only defeated his dog. A demon named Belia appears, as everyone realizes he was the one controlling the Orthros, and he challenges them to a fight, saying he won't let them escape. He attacks them with his dark magic, but Sylphie uses her barrier to block it, and he strikes with his sword, as Kaido realizes that he's incredibly fast. They start blasting him, but their attacks have no effect, and Luceria thinks Sylphie's magic will work against him, but Kaido thinks they need her barrier to survive. Ari tells him they're going to be fine, saying she can keep up with Belia's movements, so he tells Sylphie to remove her barrier, and she attacks with Luceria, but it still doesn't work. Belia charges at Kaido, but Ari stops him, so he pushes her back, and he attacks Kaido, who uses his magic sword to defend himself, and it breaks Belia's weapon. He becomes angry, because the Duke gave him his sword, so he starts punching Kaido, and sends him crashing against the wall. So he drinks a potion, as the others continue to attack Belia, and he comes up with a plan, telling Miku to distract him. So she starts shooting him, as Kaido appears behind him, and stabs him with his sword. Belia falls to the ground, and Kaido wonders if it's over, but he gets back up, and heals his wounds, as Kaido mentions that it's unfair, because monsters don't usually heal. He hits Kaido, knocking him down, preparing to finish him off, but the girls protect him, but Belia defeats them in an instant. Sylphie charges with her Divine Spear, but he throws her away, and Luceria tells Kaido to escape, as she tries to stop Belia. But he pushes her back, and Kaido notes that he can't abandon everyone, so he thinks of a way to defeat Belia. He realizes that Luceria has a skill called Beauty of Gluttony, which temporarily increases her stats by consuming a target's health. So he tells her to use it, but she explains that she needs to consume his life force while it's active, and he could end up dying, but he doesn't care, telling her he trusts her. So she activates her skill, and she transforms into her adult form, as she reveals that she has restored her levels, but she still hasn't reached her full power. Belia casts his dark magic, but it doesn't work, and she explains that he's nowhere near her level, because she's a Viscount-class devil. He can't believe how powerful she is, asking her what she's doing there, but she tells him she's going to punish him for hurting her companions. She casts her God Killer spell, which completely overwhelms him, and his body disappears, as Kaido realizes it's over. But he starts to feel sick, telling her he's about to die, so he begs her to deactivate her skill, but she asks him if he likes her adult form, promising to obey him after he answers her question. So he tells her she looks amazing, and he promises to be kind to her, so she returns to her original form. After that, Kaido realizes that he leveled up, and he gained a new skill called Pain Resistance, thinking it will help him withstand the Beauty of Gluttony. The girls tell him they also leveled up, and he thinks everyone deserves it, because they almost died. They decide to call it a day, and he realizes that the Orthros dropped a magic core, but he wonders why it's bigger than the others. He sees Belia's servant card, and he asks everyone what they should do with it, so the girls tell him he can have it, but he thinks he doesn't need it, because he already has Luceria. She explains that Belia has an extremely low rank as a devil, so she suggests selling the card. But Kaido summons him instead, looking forward to having another powerful servant, but Belia turns into a kid. He reveals that his level has been reduced after he was summoned, and Kaido immediately regrets his decision, wishing he sold him instead, so Belia starts crying. We see Kaido taking a shower, as he wonders why he decided to summon Belia, who appears behind him, and he washes his back. He begs Kaido not to abandon him, because he wants to stay with him, so Kaido promises not to sell him, and the girls overhear them, realizing they're already friends. They head to Hitsugaya, and they show her the magic core, but she's surprised that an Orthros appeared on the 9th floor, so she decides to send a group to investigate. She decides to pay him 24 million yen for the core, and he can't believe how expensive it is, but he explains that he wants to share the money with the girls, because they helped him defeat the monster. Hitsugaya tells him she can give him the documents for his tax return, but he has no idea what she's talking about. We see Kaido eating with the girls, and he asks Ari for advice, because he doesn't know how to file taxes. So she tells him to keep a record of his expenses, but he mentions that he has already thrown away his receipts, and Mika tells him to hold on to them next time. They're about to go home, and Ari mentions that she had a great time, thinking special things are drawn to Kaido, because they just met an Orthros and a devil on the 9th floor. He notes that he has already acquired 3 servant cards, so he thinks she's right, but he still believes there's nothing special about him. We see Mika calling Hikari, and they're excited to explore the dungeon again, because they all want to try their new skills. Mika tells Hikari not to push herself, and she explains that she's fine, but after their call, she starts coughing, and she appears to be sick. The next day, Kaido tells Belaya to show everyone his skills, but he explains that he needs a weapon, because he's a knight. Kaido recalls that he broke Belaya's sword, so he gives him a rod, saying it's the only weapon they have at the moment. Belaya takes it, and he uses it to defeat goblins, as Kaido realizes that he's a skilled fighter, but Luceria tells him he's slower than before. So he explains that his body is still at level 1, but he begs Kaido to let him stay, saying he wants to be useful to everyone, and he promises to do his best to become the group's sword. Kaido acknowledges his strength, and he looks forward to working with him, but he mentions that he wants to test his healing skill. So Kaido decides to lower his HP, and he tells Belaya to use Dark Cure, but it only heals a tiny portion of his health. Belaya explains that it only restores enough HP to prevent someone from dying, and Kaido thinks about using it with Luceria's Beauty of Gluttony, so that they can achieve an infinite loop. She thinks they should give it a try, but he reminds her that his health is already low, so he could end up dying. He trips on a rock, injuring his hand, but Belaya uses his Dark Cure to heal him, and he realizes it also stopped the pain, telling Belaya his skill is useful. Hikari tries out her Ice Circle spell to freeze a golem, as Ari uses her new skill to deliver the finishing blow. Kaido thinks they're amazing, but Ari mentions that her skill consumes an insane amount of mana, so she can't use it carelessly. More golems appear, but Miki uses her illusion magic to distract them, as Snatch activates his skill called Hedgehog, which releases countless needles. They're able to defeat the golems, and Kaido realizes that their combination attack has gotten stronger. They head deeper into the dungeon, and they encounter a group of monsters, so Kaido tells Sylphie to use her new Song of Valkyrie skill. She starts singing, as a massive angel appears, and Kaido notes that he feels a strange power flowing through his body. He realizes that the monsters appear to be moving slower, and he kills one of them in an instant, as Luceria summons Hellfire to burn a goblin, and Belaya takes out the last one. Kaido asks them if Sylphie's skill worked on them, so Luceria reveals that she felt stronger, but Belaya explains that he didn't feel anything. So they think it's because he isn't close to Sylphie, and Ari tells him he needs to build relationships with everyone. He reveals that he can fight better with a sword, so Kaido decides to buy him one, and he starts crying tears of joy, saying he will do his best. Another group of monsters appear, and he easily defeats them with his sword, impressing everyone. Kaido asks for his advice on how to wield a sword, and Belaya is eager to teach him, but he explains that he needs to go home, and Ari invites him to study in her house. We see Kaido and his friends waiting in front of a gate, as Miku and Hikari join them, and they ring the doorbell. The gate opens, but Kaido is confused, because he can't find Ari's house. The girls ride a car, and he wonders if he can join them, but Hikari explains that the boys need to walk, and they realize that the path is ridiculously long. The girls arrive at Ari's house, and Kasura tells her the place looks beautiful. She reveals that her family has been running a martial arts dojo for years, saying their land is equipped with everything they need to achieve the perfect balance between the mind and body. The boys finally arrive, and Ari takes them to the dojo, but they become confused, because they thought they would be studying in her room. But she explains that there's too many of them, so she decided to use the dojo. Everyone takes a seat, and Ari tells Kaido to sit next to her, asking him what he wants to learn, so he tells her he needs help with math, and she starts tutoring him. Kasura observes them, and Hikari mentions that she also needs help with her studies. So Hayako and Shinji volunteer to teach her, but Kaido knows that they're underachievers, and she tells them she wants Kasura to teach her. He mentions that Kasura is a great teacher, but his friends start teasing him, saying that he likes her. But he explains that they're just friends, and Ari becomes jealous, so she tells everyone they should go to the waterfall to calm their minds. The girls meditate, and Kasura mentions that her mind feels clear as Kaido stares at her, thinking she looks cute. She tells the boys that it's their turn to meditate, so they try to clear their minds under the waterfall, but they don't enjoy the experience. After that, we see that the boys are exhausted, but the girls mention that they had fun, saying they want to study there again. They return to the dungeon, where Luceria scolds Kaido for wasting his time at the waterfall, but Hikari mentions that they had fun, saying she wants to reach the 10th floor today. Mika tells her not to overdo it, and she explains that she's been having fun lately, saying she wants to become a hero. Monsters suddenly appear, so Sylphie uses the Song of Valkyrie, and Hikari freezes them as everyone finishes them off. Kaido can't believe they were able to defeat the monsters on the 9th floor so easily, and his servants eat the magic course, as Mika teases Luceria, telling her she looks like a hamster. They're about to reach the 10th floor, and Hikari tells everyone to follow her, but she suddenly collapses, and they realize she's bleeding. In a flashback from 2 years ago, we see Miku in a card shop, where a boy challenges her to a duel. Everyone recognizes her as the shop's champion, and they know that the boy has never won against her, but he keeps challenging her anyway. She manages to defeat him, telling him he's wasting his time, so he becomes upset, and he mentions that she can only win against him because she pays to win. But she explains that there's also a skill issue, saying her rare cards don't guarantee her victory, and that the player needs to know how to use them. He decides to leave, and we learn that she's always bored, but Hikari suddenly appears, saying she wants to challenge her. Back in the present, we see Hikari in the dungeon hospital, and we learn that she's been given a medicine, which will keep her asleep for the entire day, so Ari thinks they should leave, but Miku wants to stay with her. Kaido thinks a potion should be enough to cure her, but Miku explains that it won't work on her illness. Her parents arrive, and Miku apologizes for what happened, but they tell her it's not her fault, and they thank her for looking after their daughter. They recognize Kaido and Ari, as they reveal that Hikari talked about them, saying she enjoyed going to the park because of them. Hearing this, Mika suddenly runs away, so Kaido and Ari excuse themselves, and they chase after her. She tells them that Hikari was always smiling, and she recalls the moment when Hikari challenged her to a duel. She realizes that their cards are similar, wondering how Hikari was able to copy her deck, because it cost her a fortune to buy the cards. But she notes that her deck doesn't suit Hikari's playstyle, because she isn't aggressive, and Mika manages to secure victory. She asks Hikari why she doesn't build a deck that suits her playstyle, but she reveals she copied her deck because she loves her. Mika decides to help her build the perfect deck, and they become good friends, as Mika realizes that she's no longer bored because of her. They decide to participate in a national tournament as a pair, and they're crowned as the champions, but during the awarding, Hikari suddenly collapses. So Mika takes her to the hospital, where she gets admitted to the intensive care unit, and her parents arrive, telling Miku that they should have told her about Hikari's illness. We return to the present, as Kaido asks Miku about Hikari's illness, but she falls silent, and Ari realizes that she doesn't want to tell them. But Hikari's father arrives, and he reveals that she's suffering from an incurable illness, which causes her organs to fail over time. He mentions that she could die if she collapses again, but Ari wonders why she was always full of energy. So Miku explains that it's because of the medicine that suppresses her symptoms, and she mentions that her stats are boosted whenever they enter the dungeon. So Hikari's father realizes that she's been exploring the dungeon, but he doesn't mind, because he knows that she wanted to do it. Kaido wonders why she's been going to the dungeon, so Mika tells him it's because of a miracle medicine known as the elixir, which is capable of healing all illnesses. In another flashback, we see Miku in the card shop, as she looks up the elixir, and she realizes that it's an extremely rare item which can be found in the dungeon. But Hikari suddenly appears, knowing she's planning to find the elixir, and Hikari wants to join her, but she explains that the dungeon is dangerous, so she wants Hikari to stay behind. They head outside, and Hikari explains that she wants to find the elixir because it will help advance research and save countless lives. She doesn't want Miku to do it alone, and she realizes that Hikari has made up her mind. So she decides to let her join, saying they will find the elixir together, and Hikari mentions that she wants to be a hero for people suffering from illness. Back in the present, Hikari's father thanks Miku for taking his daughter to the dungeon, and she explains that it's all she can do right now, as Kaido realizes that her line sounds familiar. Ari and Kaido decide to help her find the elixir, thinking they can find it on the lower floors, so they decide to head deeper into the dungeon. The next day, they head to the 10th floor, where they see a group of monsters approaching. So Sylphie uses the Song of Valkyrie, and Kaido orders everyone to spread out, as they kill the monsters one by one. Belia mentions that they didn't drop the elixir, but Mika thinks they just need to keep grinding, because it's extremely rare. A sandworm suddenly appears, and it restrains Kaido, so Mika uses her illusion magic, causing it to release him, as Belia charges in, slicing it into pieces. They return to the hospital, where they tell Hikari about their adventure, and she mentions that she wants to return to the dungeon because she wants to help them defeat the monsters. Miku and Ari are about to leave, when Ari tells Kaido that she wants to become a hero who can protect Hikari, saying it's all she can do right now, and he suddenly remembers something, as he wonders where he has heard the line before. He receives a call from Kasura, who asks him about Hikari, and he thinks about lying to her. But he suddenly remembers that he heard the line from Captain Katsuragi, who told Kasura that he's exploring the dungeon because he wants to be everyone's hero, saying it's all he can do right now. Kaido ends the call, and he returns to the dungeon, thinking there's still time before it closes. He reaches the 10th floor with his servants, where they encounter a giant monster, and Kaido decides to take it on, because he wants to become a hero like Katsuragi. One evening, Kasura sees Kaido walking home, and he appears to be exhausted, so she becomes worried. His mother asks him why he's always coming home late, thinking he must be busy with his job, but he assures her that he won't work too hard. The next day, Kaido interrupts the class as he arrives late, and his teacher tells him to be more punctual. After class, Hayako and Shinji ask Kasura if she's going to visit Hikari, but she tells them she won't, and we see that Kaido is still sleeping. They wonder if he's okay, so he explains that he's just tired, and he mentions that he needs to return to the dungeon because he needs to find the elixir. Hayako and Shinji head to the hospital, where Hayako plays card games with Hikari, but he realizes that he can't beat her. She reveals that Kasura always sends her a message, but she wonders why Kasura never visits her, thinking it's because of what happened to Captain Katsuragi. She thinks he's related to Kasura because she read a book about the history of dungeons, and she realized that they have the same family name, and their eyes even look similar. Hayato tells her he's Kasura's father, and she knows that he went missing after he reached the 41st floor, thinking Kasura doesn't want to visit her because the park reminds her of her father. But Hikari thinks he could still be alive, so she wants to find him after she gets better. We return to the dungeon, where Kaido and the others prepare to fight a flaming sphinx. Sylphie uses her song to buff everyone, while Mika uses her illusion magic to distract it, and Ari attacks it from behind. Miku opens fire, as Kaido uses his magic sword to deliver the finishing blow. They realize that they leveled up, and they see that it just dropped a magic core, but Kaido thinks they should keep going, saying they should head deeper into the dungeon. After that, Hitsugaya reveals that they were able to earn over 4 million yen, and Kaido tells her to split it into 4, saying Hikari is still a member of their party. Kaido returns home, and he watches a TV show, where the protagonists mention that rare items are found in the deeper parts of the dungeon. So he thinks he can improve his chances of finding the elixir if he goes deeper, and he searches for information about the monsters on the 12th floor. The next day, we see Kaido sleeping during his class, so his teacher scolds him as his classmates laugh at him. After school, he rushes to get to the dungeon, but his friends tell him to take a break because he's pushing himself too hard. Kasura knows that he's doing this for Hikari, and she tells him he needs to rest, but he decides to go to the dungeon anyway. He's about to enter the 12th floor without Ari and Miku, but he suddenly loses his balance as Sylphie realizes that he's exhausted. Luceria tells him not to push himself too hard, but he tells them that they're just going to scout ahead. They realize that the 12th floor is covered with ice, and they look around, wondering why there are no monsters. Kaido thinks they should head back, but Sylphie suddenly feels strange, and they see countless boars rushing towards them. She creates a barrier to protect everyone, and they start running away, but they realize that the boars are catching up to them, so they have no choice but to fight. She uses her song to buff everyone, and Luceria blasts the monsters with her hellfire, but they charge through it, so Belaya and Kaido start fighting, as Sylphie summons her divine lightning. They're able to kill several monsters, and Luceria and Sylphie level up, but Kaido loses his balance again, and he ends up getting hit. The boars overwhelm him, and his health is about to reach 0, but Belaya saves him, and Sylphie mentions that she and Luceria were able to acquire new skills when they leveled up. They start casting their spells, as the monsters rush in, but they unleash their powers at the same time, causing a massive explosion. Belaya realizes that Kaido is unconscious, so he heals him, but he isn't waking up. Sylphie sees potions in his bag, so she takes one of them, trying to make him drink it, but it doesn't work, so she uses her mouth to force it into his body. She realizes that his condition is improving, so Luceria does it as well, and they take turns kissing him, telling him to wake up. He regains consciousness, and he thanks his servants for saving him, but he suddenly collapses. We see him in the hospital, where a doctor checks on him, as Ari and Miku arrive, asking Hitsugaya what happened to him. So she reveals that he encountered a stampede, and the doctor explains that his wounds have been healed thanks to the potion, but he still tells him to take a break. Miku asks Kaido if he's okay, so he reveals that he was afraid, and they leave the hospital, as Ari asks him if he wants her to escort him home. But he explains that he'll be okay, and he runs away, as Ari and Miku wonder what's wrong with him. We see him burning his magazines about the dungeon, and an article about Captain Katsuragi. He goes to see Kasura, telling her he finally understands how she feels, because he thought he was really going to die in the dungeon, realizing how worried she must always be for him. He mentions that her father was his hero, and when he went missing, there were people who criticized him, and all he could do was watch her. So he decided he would prove the haters wrong, and do what Katsuragi couldn't, to explore the dungeon and become a hero, not for himself, but to prove Katsuragi was a hero for Kasura's sake. But he apologizes, saying he's too scared to keep going. Kasura is happy he did it for her at first, but mentions that he's now doing it for Hikari's sake. She remembers what her father told her about what it means to be a hero, saying that it's someone who serves and protects, and someone who sacrifices themselves for the sake of others. So she tells Kaido he's already her hero, and thinks Hikari feels the same way. She notes that although she worries for him when he goes to the dungeon, she thinks he will regret it if he stops now, so she tells him to go back. But Kaido isn't sure, because he has no idea how to get the elixir to drop, wondering if it even exists. But Kasura tells him all he can do is what's within his power, and it suddenly gives him an idea. He prepares to go back to the dungeon, but she makes him promise he will return. Kaido meets up with the others in the dungeon, and he tells them they will farm the slimes on the first floor. He mentions that things seem to be drawn to him, so he thinks that farming slimes will be the quickest way to get the elixir. Mika mentions that the rarer items are from the deeper floors, but Ari reminds her that Kaido found both Sylphie and Luceria on the first floor. So they all start farming the slimes, and even Hayako and Shinji join in, as they all focus on saving Hikari. They take a break after a while, but they start to lose hope, because they haven't been able to get any rare items. Shinji suddenly wishes them all a Merry Christmas, and Hayako wonders if Santa will bring them an elixir. Kaido suggests throwing a Christmas party, thinking they should celebrate with Hikari as well, and Mika decides she can't give up. But Sylphie suddenly detects a presence, saying that it's something that she has never felt before. So they go to check it out, and they find a rainbow slime. Kaido tells them they can't let it get away, so they surround it on all sides. Sylphie and Luceria attack it with their spells, but it's not enough, and the slime tries to get away, but everyone stops it from escaping, and they all get closer, attacking it together, and they manage to defeat it. We see Ari and Mika taking Hikari out of the hospital as the doctor chases after them, but Hikari's parents decide to trust them. They meet up with the others, and Mika tells Hikari there's something they want to show her, revealing that they got a servant card from the rainbow slime. Luceria reveals it's for the fairy queen Titania, who is a healing type servant, so they think she might be able to heal her. Hikari wonders if they are sure, but they all tell her to summon it, so she takes the card and calls forth her servant. Titania introduces herself, and Kaido tells her master is sick, but she mentions that she's only level 1, so she can't completely cure Hikari. The others become worried, but Ari notes that she said she couldn't completely heal Hikari, which means she can still partially heal her. So they tell her to do it, and she activates her powers as Hikari starts to glow. Mika wonders if it worked, and Hikari is able to get out of bed, saying that she feels good. Mika quickly hugs her, and Hikari calls her hero, telling them all that they're her heroes. Kaido tells Kasura everything that happened, but mentions that Titania's healing will only last for about a year, so they need to help her level up or find the elixir, so they can fully heal Hikari. Kasura knows that it means he will need to keep going to the dungeon, but she just tells him to remember their promise, telling him to return safely. She wishes him a Merry Christmas, and Kaido tries to confess to her, but Kasura's mother interrupts him, telling her she will catch a cold outside. After that, we see Kaido and Kasura at a shrine, and she wonders what he wished for. So he tells her he wished for safety in the dungeon, and she still can't believe that's all he thinks about, wishing he would ask for something normal, like getting into college. But we see him with all his friends, and they continue into the dungeon. But that's where this series ends for now. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.